Welcome back to our sessions. I hope everybody had time to catch up during the break. Today, we are going to talk about industrial production and competitive markets. I will share my screen. Everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So uh, today we're going to talk about industrial production. Okay, we're going to begin with a discussion of production costs and then how that the production processes of businesses, of firms, um, manifest in the market. They manifest in the dynamics of the market. So I'm going uh, to begin um, with the production side of a firm because it's production that gives rise to cost. Okay? It's production that gives rise to cost. All right. And our objective would be to understand the framework under which firms make decisions. And the basic framework will, of course, be the free market environment. And within this, a firm will consider short run and long run implications. And so part of our objectives in this class will be to discuss the difference between short run and the long run. Okay. Explain production at a firm and why marginal product of labor eventually declines as more units are produced. This is what we call diminishing marginal returns in the process of production, and in consumption, we'll call it diminishing marginal utility. Firms, because there are differences in circumstances, uh, we will explain the difference between short-run cost curves that a typical firm faces. And we will emphasize the short run, but we will also talk about certain implications of the long run. We actually define the short run as a time period when at least one input cannot be changed. And so a firm engages in production by using different inputs. We typically use labor and capital to illustrate the process of production, but production involves, sometimes several different inputs. So in the short run, there's at least one input that cannot be changed. And typically here we will use labor and capital. And so we often hold capital hold capital constant during the short run. And it's one of those inputs that cannot be changed in the short run. Now, in the long run, though, all factors of production can be changed. Okay, you know, all factors of production can be changed in the sense that the quantities, the number of units of any factor of production can be changed in the long run. In the short run, the number of units of at least one factor of production will not be able to be changed. And examples beyond capital equipment. And if you pay rent and you have a lease, the lease obligates you to be there for 2 years, to be there for 1 year. And so uh, rental housing is a good example of short run. And in the long run, of course, things can be changed. The landlord can kick somebody out, or the tenant can feel that it's not worth it to be in this particular place, especially if cost is an issue. Okay. And so firms, the managers of firms who take into consideration both short run and long run implications. Okay. Now, as I explained earlier, we will emphasize um, capital and labor. Okay. And so if you specify a production function, the production function will show you capital and labor, and Q, the quantity of output, is represented by Q as a function of capital and labor. Okay? There are other factors. These are two factors that we will use so as to facilitate the conversation. The production function that you saw earlier as a production function is a description, can be represented mathematically, it can be presented graphically, but it's a description of the relationship between the maximum output and the quantity of a capital and labor used in production. And you can say the quantity of various factors that can be used in production, but for our purposes, we're using just capital and labor, which I illustrated to you earlier. Now, each time, in order to achieve production, you have to expend inputs. So each time an input is made, production takes place. Okay? The outcome is a production output. Okay, and so in order to be able to understand what we're going through, we would talk about average product, average physical product, which is the total product divided by the variable input. Okay, in this case, our variable input is labor. Marginal product is output that occurs with one additional unit, with one more unit of the variable factor of production, like labor. Labor is a variable factor of production. Here's an illustration here. Okay, 1 unit of labor produce 50. 2 units produce 55. So the marginal product is 5. Okay, as you can see here, the marginal product is 5, and then at input of 4 units, the marginal product does not increase. Okay, marginal product does not increase, and so you have reached the point of maximum returns. And so now the marginal product begins to decline from when you put in 6 units. You can see the marginal product declines from 58 to 55, and the marginal product will continue to decline as you put more input. But initially, uh, the output of labor will continue to increase. And so this is what a production function would look like, in the sense that output will increase as you increase labor, but as you increase more and more labor, the marginal product of labor will begin to decline, in the sense that the additional output as a result of the additional use of labor will not continue to increase output. And hence you see from my illustration, the marginal product will rise initially and it will fall. And so we have the law of diminishing marginal returns. So that the law of diminishing marginal returns, or the law of diminishing marginal productivity, or the law of diminishing marginal returns for the productivity of labor, is an observation that after some point, successive equal size increases in the variable factors such as labor added to fixed factors such as capital will result in smaller increases in output. Okay, so the additional product by making one additional input will begin to decline. Some illustrations, which I believe you read. Okay, here again. Now, as a result of the law of diminishing marginal returns, now remember when the output of labor begins to diminish, that is the marginal product of labor begins to diminish, that means then that average cost of production would go up. So we can see here in this illustration where we have to understand that input is costly. And so as you make input, your cost of production increases. And so in analyzing costs, you have average costs, you have marginal costs, and you have total cost. Now, total cost is the total cost of production, and average marginal product is the additional cost of making one unit of additional input. Okay, average product is, average cost is simply the total cost divided by the quantity of output. Is the average cost. So in this illustration, you can see here that at zero input, nothing is produced. Nothing is produced, but there's still a cost. The fixed cost is $10. So essentially, we're going to be combining both cost and productivity to see, to discuss the, what do you call it, the behavior of firms and managers. But you can see here that total cost goes up 10, 15, 18, 20, 21, it goes up to 56. And then the average cost is declining. And this is because the marginal product is also declining. As you can see here, average cost will decline for a while and also begin to rise. When average cost begins to rise, when marginal product begins to decline, that means that fewer and fewer outputs is produced for each additional unit of input. And so your average cost is going to be diminishing. This is a graphical illustration. The sense that total variable costs, it's always below total cost. But as you can see, the cost, the average cost, you can see here, this is total variable cost. Let's look at in the form of averages. You can see that average total cost begins to decline and then begins to rise. In the same way, marginal cost declines and then rise again and cut the average cost and the total average total cost from below. All right. So in the short run, there are total costs, there are fixed costs, and there are variable costs. And so total cost plus is total fixed cost plus total variable cost. The fixed cost is fixed, and in short run, each additional output you make diminishes your average fixed cost. Okay, but your average total cost might continue. Your total your average total cost might continue to increase, but the point is that the average cost uh, will be declining, and then after a while, it will be increasing. Okay, the average total cost is ATC, TC over Q. The marginal cost is change in total cost as a result of change in output. Okay. Now, as long as the marginal physical cost going up, marginal cost, I'm sorry, as long as marginal physical product is increasing, that is, the productivity of labor goes up, then marginal cost will fall, and average cost will also be falling. You can see in this illustration, total product will always be rising. The average, the marginal cost, the marginal productivity could be falling, and then the uh, total cost will not fall. So now for this illustration, as you can see here, the more labor you add, the total product will continue to increase. But after a while, when marginal, uh, when the law of diminishing marginal returns begin to set in, marginal product will begin to fall, and average product um, will also begin to fall. Now, what is the implication? You can see that as average product is falling, so average cost will begin to rise. Same way as marginal product is declining, um, marginal cost will begin to rise. Okay, so you can see long run average cost, um, eventually, theoretically, to be flat, but it's never flat. Okay. Now, so what are the implications for the marketplace? What are the implications for the marketplace? Let's define some, let's provide some assumptions. Um, what we have just discussed apply to competitive firms in competitive industries. Okay. And in this competitive environment, what they call pure competition, uh, uh, firms can go in freely and in and out of the market. Okay. They can go in freely in out of the market. Okay. We're going to discuss the perfectly competitive firm. And in the perfectly competitive firm is a price taker. Okay. Okay. Now, I mean, in an environment like the hot dog market, there are large numbers of buyers and sellers, a lot of assumptions. Okay. The products of perfectly competitive firm are perfectly homogeneous, and they're perfect substitutes. Okay. We assume that everybody has information to access the market. There are no barriers to entry. Nothing stops you from going in. Okay. The basic legal services industry exhibits key characteristics of perfect competition. Uh, basic legal services, not the big in the big companies. Okay. Now, the perfectly competitive firm also, like we say, is a price taker. The market determines the price, and all sellers in the market follow that price. Okay. As you can see, the competitive firm is a price taker. Okay, the demand curve of a competitive firm is flat, but the equilibrium price is determined by the market. Once the market determines the equilibrium price, nobody can change it. Okay. Now, the competitive firm depends on revenues, and so as a price taker, the, the total revenue is quantity times price. Okay? The total revenue of a firm is quantity times price. The total cost, of course, is total fixed cost plus total variable cost. Now, for the competitive firm, P is determined by the market, but Q is determined by the producer. So the producer feels like producing and giving it away, too bad. But the competitive firm is a price taker, and so we're going to analyze what happens in the marketplace. Okay, so here then is an example of what happens in the marketplace. Okay, you have output here, you have costs of a market price that is set by the market. Okay, the competitive firm cannot touch that. And then the firm sells nothing. Okay, the price is 5, and so there is no revenue. Okay, now how about cost? Now you can see as you input, you also have a cost of it. This is the average cost, the average variable cost. This is marginal cost, and that is marginal revenue. So for the competitive firm, the marginal revenue does not change. Okay, the marginal revenue and the price are the same thing. But as you can see here in column 4.2, okay, you can see here actually in column 5. Okay, sorry, I'm in a somewhat noisy place. If you sell nothing, you get no revenue. As you increase your revenue, as you increase your quantity sold, revenue increases. But your marginal product, I mean your marginal revenue is going to be the same as your price, okay? Because you have a fixed price. Now, you can see as average costs will initially begin to decline and then begin to rise, okay? That is the average variable cost. The marginal cost also diminishes and then begin to rise because the marginal productivity of labor is falling. Okay, so this graph here illustrates the red part here or purple part is losses, and then a firm begins to make profit until the marginal cost is just much more than the average cost. That is an illustration of it. The marginal cost will cost the revenue function from below, and at the point E is the point where the firm makes its maximum profit. Maximum profit is not made at the point where you have 3. The maximum profit is at the point E. Okay, we have already explained that marginal revenue um, is just the additional revenue from selling an additional unit. For a competitive firm, the marginal revenue is constant, and which is the marginal revenue and the price are the same. So let me go back and explain to you. You can see You can see here, the maximum profit is made at the point where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. At this point, E. This point, marginal revenue is constant, it's at 5, and marginal cost, okay, and here you can see that the point where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue, the firm makes its maximum profit. Let me see if I can go back to the chart. Okay. That is not, see. All right. So you see here that we talk about the firm's profits, column 5. And you see here where the maximum profit is 5. What you will recognize is here at this point where the maximum profit or profit maximizing output is 8 units. The marginal revenue is 5, but also the marginal cost is 5. So profit is maximized at the point where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost, which in this case, you can see here at 5, marginal cost, and the marginal revenue is also 5. So where these two meet, then that is where the firm will maximize profits. So you can see here the marginal cost was rising, and then began to, I'm sorry, the marginal cost is declining, declines and declines and declines, and hits bottom at 1 and then begins to rise. Okay? And when it rises to the 0.5, you can see that both marginal revenue and marginal cost are 5. The marginal cost will increase. I'm sorry, the marginal cost will fall and fall and fall, hits rock bottom, but then begins to rise. And so the firm's decision is to stop output or to cease to increase output at 8 units, because at that point, marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. But you can also see that also this is where they have their profit maximizing output. Okay, you can see here that marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost at the point here between 7 and 8, where average cost is at the bottom, and you see that that's where a firm maximizes profit. Okay. Now, this is short-run analysis. A firm will continue to produce as long as it is making normal profits. Okay. But in the long run, for example, here you can see in a competitive industry, eventually marginal cost and marginal revenue will produce what you call normal profit. But in the long run, as firms come in, profits, any excess profits will be competed away by other competitors until there is no more excess profit in the industry. Okay, I'm going to post these illustrations for you so that you can make sense out of the rest of the lecture. Okay, so does anybody have any questions? Hello?
Professor, I don't really have any questions on the lecture, but I was just wondering, we did have a midterm and
Mm-hmm.
all the assignments. I was just checking on grades. Nothing is posted. And I was just wondering when we might be able to see, how we're doing in this class, because we only have, what, 2 weeks left?
Okay. Let me check again. Maybe something can, I overlooked something. I hope I did not. I don't like to overlook things. There has been no request for midterm grades, but I'm going to check my email. And maybe because I was in transit for a while. And so I was not able to see any email requesting midterm grades. But I'll make sure that I look into it tomorrow. Okay. So I make a note for myself.
And Professor, with that being said, when is everything pretty much due for class, for the end of class?
Should be sometime around May 7th.
Okay. So as long as we
Okay.
have everything in by May 7th, we should be good, right?
Yeah, it should be good. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. That's another question, because every time the postings, it says it has to be done by Sundays, by the Sunday. So I'm just kind of
I took off the
confused.
deadlines. I think I took off the deadlines.
So
Just make sure.
disregard the deadlines?
I wouldn't say that for the record. But I did take off the deadlines.
Okay.
So even if you go to quiz one, it's still open. You can still do it.
Okay. Got you.
All right.
Thank
And
you.
so we have
Thank
two more like papers due, right?
Yes, those the critiques. Yes.
The critiques, rather. They're not really papers, but the critiques of the
Yeah.
article critiques.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
All right. Any more questions?
Yes, Professor. Once I tried to do one of the critiques, it
Mhm.
wouldn't pull up the PDF file for me to do.
Oh, okay. Send me an email and first send me a text. So then you have my phone number. Am I correct?
No, I don't have your phone number, but I can take it down right now.
Okay. Let me put it in the chat, but I think it's in the syllabus.
Okay, okay.
Don't worry, I'll put it in the chat. You have it?
Yeah, I got it, sir. Thank
All
you.
right. So any other questions? Okay, hearing none. Thank you all for showing up. I'm glad we always have a full session, a full class. And so have a nice evening.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care.
All right.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you.
Good night.
Have a good night.
All right,
Later,
Professor.
brothers.
Mm.